So, kicking off with understanding a little bit more around loneliness and what it means, the word loneliness in itself. And I want to start off with this quote. Olivia Laing wrote this in an interesting book actually called The Lonely City, Adventures in Art of Being Alone. And I think the way she describes loneliness is quite suitable here because so much of the pain of loneliness is to do with the concealment of it, right? With feeling compelled to hide that vulnerability, to tuck the ugliness away and to cover up those scars as if they're literally repulsive. But why hide? That's so shameful about wanting, about what's so shameful about wanting, about desire, about having failed to achieve satisfaction, about experiencing unhappiness. And I think that's a really powerful quote to put in here and to think about when talking about loneliness. It's one of those feelings that we just have, right? We've all got anger, we all sometimes feel happy, elated, sad, and loneliness is part of that. Um, I'd say it's probably not on the positive spectrum, but more so on the negative. But it's something that, we're talking about more so and is a normal human feeling. And so normalizing it also and validating it both internally, but also within the groups that we have is really, really important. We'll also talk a little bit about the stigma of loneliness. I think, unfortunately, in today's world, we're expected to. Oh, can you not hear me, Alex? I know quite a few people can, so if you can't, perhaps try to pop out the call and jump back in. Yeah, so we'll talk a little bit around also the stigma of loneliness. A lot of the time it's linked loneliness with mental health, and feeling lonely can impact our mental health, and also as a consequence of that, make us feel more lonely. So kind of a bit of a cycle around that. So thinking about loneliness, I like to become a bit of a nerd and go into the research around understanding these topics really from many different perspectives. And one of the most important figures in the field of existential psychotherapy is a psychotherapist, Irvin Yalom, who differentiated loneliness in three different ways. The first is the interpersonal, so that disconnection from others, right? That feeling of having that separation from those around us. The second is the intrapersonal, so having that disconnection from ourselves, right? Where you almost have yourself split from not only you internally, but also those around you. And then there's that existential isolation, so a much more big, all-encompassing feeling of being ultimately alone. And I think it's really important to differentiate all of these three because we can then tackle each one differently in terms of how we can seek that support from others. Is that internally within ourselves and maybe engaging in activities that we feel we enjoy and feel comfortable in doing, even though we're alone? And I mean physically alone, not necessarily lonely. Or do I need to reach out to friends, family, or maybe new individuals and create new connections? So before we go into understanding, what leads to feelings of loneliness, I think it's important to recognize the impact that it has, not only on us and on our well-being, but also the cost, right? I mean, there's a significant cost to employers, and from research suggests over 2.5 billion a year. And this research was in 2018, so I can imagine now with new ways of working, a lot of hybrid working, that probably has increased significantly. Having good relationships both in and out of work will also lead to more engaged and resilient employees. So not only do we as employees feel happier and feel more connected with others, but also will perform better. And that as a consequence will actually improve our own mental health and well-being. Having meaningful work is good for our mental health and also less likely to lead to loneliness. So they're highlighting the fact of having a safe and purposeful working life is important. And having a sense of purpose and belonging at work is also crucial. And there's a lot of research that actually suggests that having that feeling of purpose and having sort of a drive and not only improves our mental health, but also our longevity in the long term, which I think is a really interesting, probably a whole other webinar in itself. But of course, things can impact our loneliness. So changes at work can significantly impact how we feel, not only at work, but also in our day-to-day life, right? If we're having really good connections at work, perhaps we're happy to go home in the evening and have a little bit more introverted evening where we don't see other people. And that's also absolutely fine. Thinking also in the bigger picture around things such as redundancies or job changes, these things, or even just changes in management, these things can also lead to unexpected loneliness, right? Perhaps we were really connected with a team beforehand, and then suddenly we've had to shift teams because for whatever reason, and suddenly we're in a new environment and we have to rebuild those connections. And even that can be quite isolating. So recognizing that loneliness isn't sort of only a one size fits all, but it's actually in many different instances. So thinking a little bit about what leads to loneliness, and I think loneliness is very subjective. It will be it will impact individuals very differently. It will vary from person to person, even the levels of the amount of loneliness we experience. I think certain life events or experience might also lead to us feeling a little bit more lonely. I've put some examples here. So, experience perhaps a bereavement, going through a relationship breakup, retirement. A lot of research suggests that individuals who retire will have a period of quite high happiness and enjoying that sort of newfound freedom. But then there's actually a dip where there's sort of that feeling of I had that connection at work and now I know I don't have that anymore. So if either yourselves are entering into that stage or perhaps have friends or family or other colleagues that are about to retire, just considering about how that might be impacting them or how it might impact them. Changing jobs, right? Not only is it a new role, new systems, new people, perhaps new environment, new commute, all these things can change how we feel and can potentially make us feel lonely. As I mentioned, we may already be experiencing mental health issues, and so as a consequence of that, might actually seek being a little bit more isolated, and as a consequence, again, will make us feel more lonely. Becoming a parent, which in a way is a really happy and positive thing. But if perhaps you're the first individual in the friendship group to become a parent and everyone else maybe is still, living quite a free and child-free lifestyle, as a parent, you might feel a little bit more isolated within that group. So even sort of from positive experiences, we might feel lonely. Moving to a new area, city, or country, again, potentially a really positive or a really great opportunity if that's work-wise or for whatever other reason. But again, new environment can really make you feel quite isolated. And even holiday times, right? There might be certain times of the year, such as Christmas, Ramadan, Valentine's Day, some specific moments throughout the year that can be quite heightened in terms of also expectations and pressure. And those are the moments where we might feel also more lonely. So I'm curious to hear from you guys. What are some other examples that you either have found in yourselves or have heard from colleagues, friends, family? What are some of the things that might lead us to feeling a little bit more um, lonely? And that might be temporary or it might be longer term. Yeah, great example. Thank you for sharing. So children leaving home, right? For many years you've lived with others in your house and suddenly maybe they're going to university or they're deciding to go off and travel, as they say, leaving the nest, right? And that's a really challenging situation to be in. And suddenly it's all quiet. All of that chaos that we didn't like before, um, it's not there anymore. And now we want it back almost. Another example, being a singleton, a friend of in a group of friends of couples. Yeah, absolutely a great example. It can be really challenging. We want to hang out with everyone, but suddenly it's a different sort of it's a different vibe at the end of the day, right? That the context, maybe even the activities they want to take part in, or even simply just the fact of it. Someone else has said a parent going through cancer. Yeah, that can feel really isolating, especially when being a carer, potentially, or even just having an individual in your family going through health issues. It can feel really, really lonely and isolating to have to sit with that, and maybe sit also with the concern and the worry. Having lived experience, intersectionality, yeah, experience a different life phase compared to your peers. I think that's a really massive one, isn't it? Heading into sort of um, from your 20s into your 30s into your 40s, and even beyond that, 40s into 50s, there's shifts, there's 10 years where sort of everyone's living life in a different, at a different level, at a different rhythm. And that's absolutely okay. It's just about sort of how can I find others maybe that are at my same level and trying to maybe spend a little bit more time with those individuals so that I don't feel that exclusion so much. Someone else has shared working online all the time with limited in-person connection with colleagues. Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit about sort of hybrid working and after the pandemic and how that brought so much positive flexibility to our lives, but also a lot of isolation, physical isolation, right? Someone else just said, yeah, living with a long-term health condition, absolutely. And having to navigate that on a day-to-day basis, it can be really challenging, having good days and bad days. Someone else has shared being a carer, yeah. um, Disability, sexuality, carer to a family member, yeah. And I'll share a little bit later some research around that. And actually, a lot of individuals who identify as disabled or within the LGBTQ plus sphere experience a lot of that loneliness because at the end of the day, they are a smaller percentage compared to what we would call the rest of society. But I think also our society has been built for individuals who are heterosexual, who are not disabled, and that can be a really challenging environment to live in. So just considering all these things, yeah, absolutely, really important. Social media is a massive one. We've all been sort of lying in bed in the evening and scrolling through social media and seeing people on great holidays and we suddenly get, this fear of missing out, or we just feel alone, or we feel other people are have so many friends and we don't, and sort of all these negative self-talk and negative thoughts come up. And that's why it's really important to sort of consider, okay, when am I being actually impacted by these things? Taking a moment, pausing, and thinking about what do I need? Some other examples around PTSD of absolutely boredom, yeah, massive one. Having low confidence for several different reasons, yeah. Interesting that you mentioned that, and we'll talk a little bit about that later. Low mood due to menopause, yeah, absolutely. Someone has shared rent increases has caused them to move out of London. Smaller town is a better place to live in due to the costs. But of course, all friends and social life are back in London. So, there you have to weigh up the finances versus do I stay around my friendship group? And it's really challenging, I think, to have to recreate friendship groups when you've moved. It's one thing when maybe you're at university and you've got everyone else in the same boat. It's another thing when maybe you're further down the line, you're working, you're doing different things. It's sort of harder to make new friends. So yeah, thank you so much everyone for sharing. We've also got, yeah, having a criminal record absolutely creates so much stigma around that and dealing with abuse and feeling unable to talk to others about it. Yeah. Thanks everyone for sharing. I really appreciate it. So we can see here that, there's a lot that might be going on and a lot of different reasons for why we might feel lonely. It's not only, I'm an elderly individual and I'm sat at home. There are so many other reasons why I might feel lonely. So as I mentioned, I just want to briefly talk about how the pandemic has impacted us. And I think in many ways, it's allowed us to live a very flexible lifestyle. So allowing us to work from home, maybe take care of individuals, of children, um, do our washing every now and again, even the practical things. But it's led to a lot of loneliness, right? Feeling that we're spending a lot of time at home behind a screen, but maybe not actually seeing as many people. And that can even just simply be, on the commute to work, grabbing a coffee at the local coffee shop. We always used to get coffee and say hello to the person that's working there. That's a connection that we don't have anymore, right? So thinking about, how is this impacting me and what can I maybe do to change that? So again, question to you guys. I'm sure you all have different working arrangements. So I'm curious to hear what does that look like and how does that impact you, right? How has the pandemic and this new way of working affected your connections or even your feeling of loneliness. Maybe it's decreased your feeling of loneliness. Maybe you can spend much more time with your partner or with your children or with your next door neighbor and you work together from home. Um, yeah, what are sort of the impacts that you experienced from this new way of working? I think, if I can kick off at least, I think that the benefit of having a flexible working life is that you can choose, right? You can have that option of today, I'm checking in with myself. I feel the need to maybe see some colleagues or get out the house. And so I can go and commute to work and have that interaction, albeit with people that maybe I don't know, but at least I'm having that interaction with people. Great. Thanks so much. You guys are sharing. So, some of you said that you've got hybrid working, but mostly from home. And finding it difficult to go out. I think we sort of fall into this rhythm, this routine of, well, it's easy to stay at home. We sort of get up in the morning, maybe make some breakfast, make a coffee, and I want to make the most of the morning. So maybe sleep as much as I can, right? So actually, I don't have a time to go off and maybe quickly do some errands before the working day. So also considering those little things. A lot of you are working from home, a lot of hybrid working. Some of you saying that you're working a lot from home all the time and it's super lonely. And we'll talk a little bit about how we can change that at the end of the session. Um, Someone has said, I've started working from home around 6 weeks ago and I'm finding it difficult not seeing others, but I also don't like to leave the house. Yeah, and I think that's also okay, right? Just recognizing when do I need to be alone and sort of enjoying that space. But when maybe do I have to push myself a little bit and think, okay, let me just go for a walk and not necessarily interact directly with people, but see how I feel in those environments. And then maybe, having a conversation if I feel ready to do so. And someone has shared making myself go for walks, absolutely. Um, Someone has shared only issue being not everyone has the same working pattern. Yeah, absolutely. Meaning sometimes you're in the office on your own. Yeah, and I'm really glad you raised that actually because I often come to the office by myself and I sort of have learned to enjoy that aspect. It means, I have sort of a destination to get to in the morning. I have to change my morning routine. It sort of switches things up a little bit. I get to chat to the individuals in reception, or maybe when I go and grab some lunch, I talk to the person behind the counter. So even these small instances help me feel just that slight bit less alone in certain moments. Now, of course, in certain days, even though I'm having those interactions, I can still feel lonely. Loneliness doesn't necessarily happen only when you are alone. Um, but I think in those moments, I recognize that and I think, okay, I'm noticing this. I want to maybe feel a little bit less lonely. I think I need to build a connection with a friend or a family and sort of then make that next step of let me give them a call. Let me see if I can organize something with a friend. Thanks. A lot of you have also shared that you work predominantly from home and sometimes go to the office and you really miss that human connection. Yeah, and I think that's natural. Um, Amazing. Yeah, so 50-50 working from home and the office. Some of you have moved away also from maybe where your working offices were beforehand, especially during or before the pandemic or even after. And I think that can also be really difficult, right? Again, remaking all those friendship groups. Thanks for sharing, guys. So I spoke a little bit before about sort of the needs that we have to feel good in everyday life. And I'm sure many of you, if not all of you, have heard of Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And connection to others is actually fundamental to both our physical or mental well-being. In fact, that feeling of being part of something and feeling connected is second only to our basic needs of food, water, and safety. So as here, it's that third point there. So beyond our basic needs, having that ability of shelter, clothes, air, etc., and having that safety is that need to feel like I belong, that I'm connected to others. It's a human innate quality of need, right? And so it just shows how important it is for us to be able to live and feel good within ourselves and within the environment that we're in. Um, Yeah, loneliness is unfortunately very common. It's experienced by many individuals all over the globe. Um, in a report done in 2018, as I mentioned before, in the UK, 9 million adults are often or always feeling lonely, which is a huge number of people. And they also found that 50% of people who identify as disabled will be lonely on any given day. And again, as I mentioned, if we think about all the barriers that those individuals experience, society shape for, again, a non-disabled environment and people, it can be really difficult. Um, some other facts, 3.6 million people aged over 65 said that television is their main form of company, and that 8 out of 10 carers have felt lonely or isolated as a result of looking after a loved one. So, some of these might actually resonate both within ourselves or maybe within our family members or colleagues or friendship groups. And an extremely powerful, outcome from this study was also finding that 1 in 10 men said that they often feel lonely, but don't feel that they can admit it to anyone. And that's a really scary piece of data to think about, right? 1 in 10 men, there's 112 of you here on the call. If I'm assuming 50% of you are men, that's a significant amount of you already thinking about the fact that maybe you feel lonely, but have no space or have no opportunity to be able to talk about that. I mentioned before that there's a little bit of a difference between being alone and feeling lonely. Loneliness can hit anyone, but for example, I might be surrounded by hundreds and thousands of people in one of the busiest cities in the world, yet still feel lonely. Or vice versa, I might actually be at home alone, maybe gaming, doing a puzzle, reading a book, but not feel lonely at all. I feel content. I feel okay with myself. And so that's a really important thing to distinguish. Just because I'm surrounded by people doesn't necessarily mean that I am not alone. And just because I am alone doesn't necessarily mean that I am alone, right? Um, so what does loneliness feel like to you? If you feel comfortable sharing, what are some of the things that come up when I ask that question? How does it feel? Yeah, thank you. So someone has shared being alone is a physical state, while loneliness is an emotional state. Yeah, absolutely. Really good sort of distinction there. Thank you, Max. Someone has shared that they recently badly broke their foot and so couldn't go anywhere unless someone gave me a lift. My friends were very busy. It seemed, fortunately, I have a partner, but even with them around, it still makes you feel lonely and isolated. Yeah. I think thank you for sharing that. I think that's a really important thing to know. That can come from illness, that can come from injury, that can come from feeling really busy at work and you don't have a chance to go and do that exercise class that you always used to do on a Monday because things are too busy. And suddenly we find ourselves for a whole week stuck inside. And yeah, we need that connection to others. Some other words that are used to sort of describe loneliness is that feeling of emptiness, disconnection from others. Yeah, it makes you angry, yeah, and yeah, absolutely. Feeling the feeling to belong, the seeking of wanting to feel to belong, yeah, that desire, feeling lost, feeling someone has shared that they want to shout inside and not being able to say a word out loud, yeah. It's very common, right? Not wanting to sort of speak up, but actually there's a lot going on inside. Feeling empty and feeling things are missing, like you could disappear and no one would even notice, yeah. It's a really scary sort of situation and feeling to have, right? Even though we might have a lot of friends around us. My friends are often confused when I say I'm lonely as they see me as busy, but I still feel alone for a whole host of reasons. Yeah, and that's quite common. Thank you for sharing that. We might actually be sort of trying to keep ourselves super busy, doing a lot of things. Every evening we're out and about, but it's sort of not satisfying that need of connection, right? And we'll talk a little bit about how we can overcome that and what we can do to try and actually satisfy that need of belonging and of connection rather than just keeping busy. Um, Someone has just said, one of their greatest betrayal in recent times that had almost cost me everything I ever worked for sorry. But my greatest betrayal in recent times that had almost cost me everything I've ever worked for came from family members. Now I am super stuck whenever I want to speak to the family. The thought of the betrayal alone sparks a deep sense of loneliness. Yeah, absolutely. And I did my best to care for them before the major incident. Now I'm not sure if I should classify them as a family again. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's a really difficult situation and to sort of emotion to experience, right? And there's a lot sort of there to uncover. But I think thinking about where can I find individuals and groups that either share similar values, similar emotions, and actually create that connection with them so I feel that belonging. Yeah, thanks, guys. A lot of sharing there. I appreciate it. And again, I just want to take a moment to remind you to just check in. How are we feeling? I know this is a very difficult subject to talk about. So thank you for sharing all of these things, but just make sure you're checking in with yourselves. So loneliness and mental health, there's a significant sort of interaction between these two. As I said, though, feeling lonely is not a mental health problem, but it can impact it. When struggling with our mental health, we may actually, as a consequence, want to sort of distance ourselves. And so we might avoid social events or activities we usually enjoy. We might have a lower self-esteem. Someone shared that beforehand. We might find it hard to try new things. It can be really challenging to go off and do that new class or meet up with some new friends that we've not met before or attend some events. We might find it difficult to speak to people about how you're feeling, if some of you have shared. Fear of stigma or not being understood. Again, as you mentioned, people saying or friends saying, but you do so many activities, how can you feel lonely? But loneliness is that feeling. It's that sort of innate feeling of wanting to belong and wanting to be seen by others, right? Sometimes we have that worry that we might be a burden to others, and often we might not share. And so also feeling overwhelmed also in busy and public places. So just have a moment to kind of reflect what else might be coming up. I know a lot of you have already shared, but yeah, just take that moment to reflect. So then thinking about the cycle of how this might impact us. Now, feeling lonely has damaged my mental health. And then as a consequence of that, my mental health has made me more lonely. And sort of we enter this cycle. And so think about, do I find it hard to break this cycle? And what maybe helps to try and break it? What are the things that we can do? So a question to you all, what can we do when we're feeling lonely? What are the things that you can do to keep connected when you find yourself working from home a lot? When you find yourself maybe not having seen a lot of friends or even if you have, feeling lonely? I'm curious to hear. And I think here the first thing to recognize is actually that distinction between the disconnection of how I'm feeling lonely and what I need, right? Do I need to feel content within myself and maybe doing activities, even though I'm alone, that I enjoy? Or is it seeking new friends or old friends? Yeah, thank you for sharing. So, some of you have mentioned that you've joined some new clubs and activities to start building up a new network of friends. It's early days. Yeah, beautiful. And that takes a lot of courage. So also just recognize that, take a moment to just think, cool, I just went and I just actually met a room full of new people. And even if I didn't get along with them, that's a massive achievement for me to be able to just yeah, recognize and kind of give myself a bit of a pat on the back. Yeah, connecting with nature and going out for a walk. There's so much research out there that says that nature is actually massively impactful in lowering levels of loneliness. And nature also goes with animals, right? Can we spend more time with animals? Having regular check-ins with my team at work, make sure I keep in touch with friends and family. And if no one is around, listening to music. Music is such a good example, absolutely. So a lot of proactive things there, amazing. Someone's just said, also just booked myself a ticket to the cinema and I'm going on my own, which I've never done before, but no one else is free. I'm actually so glad you mentioned this because I've recently just done this. I've never been to the cinema by myself, but I wanted to. And it's actually a really pleasant experience. I mean, if you think about it, at the end of the day, when you go to the cinema, you're not really expected to talk to anyone. So it's kind of a really good opportunity to go and do something by yourself. I hope you enjoy it and that you'll do it again. I definitely had a good experience. and I hope you enjoy the film. Someone's mentioned creating a routine that includes going out and meeting people. Yeah, so if you prefer having that routine, maybe a regular event or a regular class, that can be really helpful. Someone said practicing self and collective care activities. Yeah, that sort of self-love, self-care is essential to feeling good and to feeling connected even with ourselves. I try to do things that cheer me up. First of all, before being able to try and get out there and fix the lonely feeling. Yeah. So doing things that get me to a different state of mind so that I feel that I've got the energy to go out and socialize. I mean, there's nothing more challenging than sort of stepping outside, going to that dinner that you've been invited to, but you just don't feel like it inside. You feel really yeah, empty. You feel pretty burnt out in a way, and you're expected to put on this big smiley face and socialize and talk about this and that and the weather and whatever. And so actually maybe doing some things beforehand so I can get myself into a space where I feel okay, can then make the future activities not only easier, but also a more positive experience for us. Someone said cuddling my dogs, love that. I'm sure they appreciate it too. Um, yeah, some meditation or listening to hypnotherapy sessions, really good idea. Meditation, yoga, all these different types of practices can be really helpful to reconnect with also the body. And often we have this sort of, with that feelings of loneliness, we might have this sort of out of body experience or feeling we don't feel connected to our bodies. So thinking about how can we focus on our breathing and just ourselves, and meditation can definitely help with that. Blue therapy helps me a lot. I've never heard of blue therapy. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about that. Someone said I send small voice notes or mini podcasts, as I call it, to my loved ones, and this creates a chain and you get to hear back from them, putting yourself out there slowly. I love that, especially if you've got family, maybe not all super near to you, so you can't really see them, or perhaps friends across the globe. Sending voice notes and updating each other is a beautiful way of staying in contact and still feeling like people do care, right? People will respond. Someone said, interesting to think about potential links with loneliness and personality types, how they experience and manage loneliness. Yeah. Introverted versus extroverted versus ambiverts. Yeah. Of course, there's many other factors which can also influence, like environmental or social health. Absolutely. And great point there. I think we're all going to have different levels of needs and expectations in terms of how much we socialize, right? So yeah, great examples. I'm conscious of time, so I am going to move on, but thank you all so much for sharing. So let's start off with that first aspect of finding comfort in your own company, right? We need to feel okay within ourselves before we can sort of jump out and start socializing with lots of different other people. So I sort of invite you to take a moment to think about what are the activities that you enjoy doing alone and you almost prefer doing alone. Often it can be things like cooking, listening to music, doing, physical activity. And this feeds in very much into that self-care, right? Um, Also, I think if we sort of actively decide, I'm going to go for a walk, but I want to do this by myself. I want to enjoy this walk. I don't want any distractions. If we sort of if we make that active decision of I'm going to go and I'm going to do it by myself, it almost makes it okay for us. And then as a consequence, we don't feel lonely. We really truly enjoy that experience. So yeah, take a moment, write things down. What are those activities that you love doing? Sometimes, as you mentioned, calling a friend. I love to sort of kill two birds with one stone. I tend to call a friend and go for a walk. So not only do I get my steps in, but I also have a chat with them, if that's a friend or a family member. Someone said also I travel a lot by myself. Yeah, really good suggestion. I think that gives you that flexibility and that ownership around, what am I going to do? Where am I going to travel to? What am I going to see? What am I going to eat? All these things. You have that opportunity and that sort of locus of control. Um, Next up instead is connecting with people that you know, right? So sometimes you might feel, okay, I feel content with myself, but actually what I need is connecting with a family member or with a friend of mine. And so trying to open up to them, and some of you have shared, right? Sending a voice note, maybe trying to make a plan in a week's time. And one thing I do want to mention is that take it slow, take it easy. We don't have to all open up straight away. It can be really difficult. especially if it's been something that we've been dealing with long term. It can be really overwhelming to have to then suddenly start connecting with lots of people. So start with small interactions, right? As I said, greeting the cashier, or I mean, I guess with people that you know, it might be your family member, it might be a colleague, and sort of slowly opening up can be really helpful. Yeah, thanks. Some of you guys have been sharing. Someone said, I make myself go to see people because I know they won't come to me to see me. Yeah, that's a really good point to raise, I think, especially in cities such as London that are so big. We often, would like people to reach out for them to come to us, but sometimes we do have to sort of put that effort in. And it can be really difficult, especially if we're not feeling up to it. But trying to take that step and see how we feel is really important. And sometimes the flip side, really just opening up and saying, look, I'm feeling really lonely at the moment. I don't think I have the energy or the capacity to come and see you. Would it be okay if you come to my house this time or to come to my neck of the woods and we can organize something there? It's also okay to open up. Someone said that they write in their journal most days to have a conversation with myself and feel closer to and find companionship with myself. Beautiful. Someone had shared in a previous webinar that we'd done that they write letters to themselves. And I think that's such a beautiful thing to do, right? Starting off with dear and then your name. I think that's a really powerful thing. Um, Someone has said that they're on a walk as I speak. I love that. They've been down to the beach and heading home now whilst listening to all of this. I'm very jealous, I must say, but I hope that you've really enjoyed your walk or that are enjoying your walk and managed to breathe in some fresh air. That's such a good idea to listen to this as you're going on a walk. Someone has said self-love and pampering, gardening and journaling. Yeah, so many different examples there. Thank you. And the next bit is connecting with others, right? Making those new connections. And again, this can be really challenging. So remind yourselves that, take it easy. I've put a lot of examples here on the screen that I've thought of, but I'm sure that there are many, many more that maybe you have either done yourselves or have thought of. So the one thing I want to emphasize, though, is that when we're finding other individuals or communities to create a connection with, I really would emphasize that we should find people that have shared values or have shared interests. And the reason for that is because we can really create that connection, that bond with individuals that get it, right? That have sort of the same vision. An example for myself, I'm a big runner and I've just decided to join a load of run clubs. And some of them I like the environment, I like the individuals, and others, they're just not my kind of people. And so I put my energy in those where I feel I belong, I feel valued, I feel people talk to me and are interested in what I have to say, right? So thinking also about those things. How do I feel with the people and the individuals around me? Other examples are volunteering, the local gym, maybe learning a new skill or an instrument, specific activities or hobbies, maybe next door neighbors or certain communities or activities in your neighborhood. Taking a look at any flyers that maybe are in some shops, looking for individuals for certain groups. Social media, whilst it can unfortunately create and bring loneliness, it can also bring people together. And I've put in some examples here. Meetup is a great example of being able to actually meet up with strangers. It's a website where you can sort of find people who share your interests. I've actually taken part in some of these, and they're really, really interesting experiences because you meet individuals that maybe you would have never met before, but share this passion. Borrow My Doggy is also great if you're a pet fan. You can take pet care of people's animals and you can meet them, which is obviously great. And also those social farms and gardens. If you are an individual who loves gardening and also animals, yeah, think about connecting to those. I can see some of you already sharing in the chat. Thank you so much. I've got gardening, listening to music. Someone says all of my things were exercise based, and so I've had to change what I do due to the foot break as I can't do them anymore. Yeah, and I hope you sort of have managed to explore maybe some other passions that maybe have been pushed aside due to your love for exercise. So maybe that's also sort of the blessing in disguise in these situations. Someone said Andy's Man Club or Men in Sheds are good for men. Lots of like-minded people. Thank you so much for sharing. That's really important because there are fewer communities for men. So learning about these, and this is the beauty, I think, of these sessions, right, where we can sort of learn from one another. Someone has said yes. A reaction to a previous comment. Yeah. Around big day out to Alton Towers, and maybe you can connect with other family members, maybe through schools. Um, Someone has said, I love these ideas. I am a classic, starting to put things in place. Then my health, either physical, as I have long-term condition, or my mental health, takes a dive, and my motivation goes, and I am back to square one. Yeah, it is really challenging. And I think that's why it's a bit of a trial and error. Give these a go, see what works, see what doesn't. And just, again, check in with yourselves and see, and be honest and be true to yourself. Say, look, I don't think I vibed with this group. Let me try the next one. And that's absolutely okay. You can go hobby shopping, right? And give them all a try. Someone said we run a men's group with an allotment. Yeah, another beautiful idea. And there are so many different communities out there. It does just take a little bit of sort of work to think about where we can find them, but they are out there. Um, So before we sort of finish up, I just wanted to remind you all to take this time daily, 5 minutes to just have a moment to check in with yourselves. How are you doing? How is your body, your thoughts, your feelings? Something that I've been doing every morning is the moment I wake up, I sort of wash my face, go to the bathroom, and then I just look out of my window and I think about, what do I need today? Right? And that might be, I need some time for me. I just need to connect with myself. Or it might be, you know what, I need to go to that run club. I haven't been in a few weeks. Or it might simply be, I need to send a voice note to a family member. So having and taking a time out to be able to connect with how you're doing and what you need is essential. Um, Someone has just shared, it's really interesting to hear you say that it's best to find your sort of people. I often try to be friends with everyone, which can then make me feel more lonely as we are not always on the same page. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. It's a really difficult decision to make, I think, sometimes in sort of accepting that we can't be everyone's friend, right? I mean, if we think about ourselves, even if we're maybe potentially more people pleasers or tend to be quite extroverted, happy, bubbly people that like to be friends with everyone, there will be some individuals that we connect with more so than others, right? So that will go two ways. And I can assure you that, if you sort of stick with it and think about, and also putting your energy and your time in those people that do care about you and that you feel connected with, will have much more positive impact on you. So almost saying no to someone else, to a certain group, is in a way saying yes to ourselves, right? And to what we need. So before we get some time for Q&A, I just wanted to emphasize the importance of self-care. And we spoke a little bit about this, but remembering that, self-care is essential for both building our resilience, but also ensuring that we're feeling okay within ourselves. And am I doing this on a day-to-day basis? I love saying, whenever I talk about self-care, that International Self-Care Day is the 24th of July, which is 24/7, because we need to be doing it every single day. And it is very true. We do need to engage in that every day. But importantly, we need to recognize our boundaries, right? Thinking about, as some of you have just mentioned now, sometimes we want to be friends with everyone. Sometimes we need to protect ourselves and our boundaries. Maybe people are seeking us and we don't have that capacity. We don't have that space or that time to be able to support them because we're engaging in our own time and self-care. And that's also absolutely okay to say, I'm sorry, I can't right now. But vice versa, often with loneliness, sometimes it's actually we want to be alone. We seek that feeling of being physically alone in a space. That's also a boundary, and that's also absolutely okay. We don't always have to be with people. So I've shared a few more resources here, and you'll be able to access the recording, so you'll be able to take a look through these. But hopefully some of these are very helpful. I've put some phone numbers there also for you to be able to call up, and I've given a little bit of a variety. But I do also just want to mention that on Ellie, you have access to many different podcasts, videos specifically around this topic, but also around many other topics. So do have a look at that. And there are also the resources linked to all of those. So thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We do have some time now for Q&A. I know Jake is going to launch a a quick poll. I'd really appreciate it if you guys just answered that as we're going through the Q&As. But feel free to send through now your questions, and Jake, I'll ask you for your help in reading through them. But yeah.
No, that was great. Just like to say, first of all, Clara, on behalf of everyone here today, thank you for such an insightful session. The information you shared on how to manage loneliness was incredibly useful, and it's allowed so many people to give their open and honest thoughts. So, yeah, a really big thank you.
Thank you,
Just to
Jake.
mirror what Clara has said, we would encourage you to ask what is on your mind, whether it's about your own situation, overcoming any specific challenges, or just something you're interested about. And Clara, we did get a few questions before the webinar started. So I'll kick you off with one. What are some common signs of loneliness?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question to answer because it's such a subjective experience, right? Some of you have shared that often when we're feeling lonely, we try to go out and do lots of different activities and just be with people all the time. So sometimes it's sort of that excessive wanting to socialize, and sometimes it's actually withdrawing. So maybe having a week of lots of socializing and then suddenly a week of not leaving the house and just wanting to be within our own company. So I'd say, for yourselves, just recognizing maybe these significant shifts in terms of how much we're spending time with others, but also in others, in terms of your colleagues, friends, and family. How are you finding their changes in behavior? Are they mentioning any things that says, "Oh, I've felt a little bit lonely recently, so can we maybe reach out to them a few more times in the week than maybe we would have done beforehand?"
That's great. Thank you, Clara. And then a bit more of a specific question that we've had just come through from the chat as well, in relation to one of our participants' parents, and just saying, like, recognizing their signs and symptoms of loneliness. Is there anything that you'd give any ideas for in that regard?
In terms of seeing in a parent.
Yeah, just how you could support them if you
Oh,
believe that because they are in
yeah.
an isolated scenario.
Yeah. So I think first of all, having some, check-ins, if that's either through a call or maybe if you have the possibility and being able to go a couple of times a week to visit them, a little goes a long way, I think, when you're spending time with people. So being able to yeah, maybe go for dinner or reach out, and also signposting them to some of those supports available. I've put here as the first one there, Open Age aims to empower older people to combat loneliness. And this one's specific to London, but there are some other resources on Ellie. And this allows individuals that both, of all ages, elderly or young, to fight that feeling of social isolation. There's actually a really interesting one in here around bringing together elderly people with children, and how actually, and by children I mean infants, so babies. And this not only helps the parents because if they're busy, they can sort of bring their children to this space, and it's a really beautiful space for also elderly parents. So I definitely would say, yeah, reach out to them, have those regular check-ins, do maybe some more active taking part in, dinners or going over for a cup of tea, and then signposting them towards these supports.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Clara. Then we have a new question as well. How do you strike the balance regarding feeling lonely, but also getting peopled out quite quickly, which can be draining?
Um, so by peopled out, I'm interpreting that as sort of feeling outside of that group and not feeling connected. Is that correct? Is that what I've um
We can wait for the
understood?
a follow-up for the
Yeah,
definition of peopled out. But I was under the assumption as well, it's when you are in a situation of overwhelmingness. So you've got the two parts playing where
yeah,
sometimes you have the loneliness capacity, but then the common is, yeah, expanded people out as in being
yeah.
overwhelmed in scenarios.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you for clarifying. So I think, those are the situations where we can take a moment to check in with ourselves and just think, what is going on here? Why maybe am I feeling that overwhelm and that feeling peopled out? Is it, because I've had a really busy week and I'm actually really overwhelmed and my sort of stress bucket is quite full already and I've tried to overcompensate and go out and meet people or be with friends? Or is it actually maybe the people I'm with or the environment I'm in? Is this really truly supporting me and my own well-being in this moment? Do I connect with these people? Do they have shared values? I often like to sort of when I meet new individuals, my test to figure out whether these people are my people or not is to literally just think, was this an easy conversation for me to have? Or did I have to put a lot of energy into thinking about my next question or smiling and laughing at what they had to say? And if my answer is no, that was really easy, then I'm like, yeah, maybe these are my kind of people. I'll happily see them again. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
Thank you very much, Clara. Another question. What if you are having trouble finding your people in the place you live? Is it better to refrain this in lowering standards for who your people are just to have company, or staying committed to your standards but recognizing your life will be spent on the phone?
Yeah, again, it's a really difficult, it's a great question, a difficult one to answer, but I think, one shouldn't lower their standards. One has personal needs and desires and expectations out of sort of what they need and what they want from their friends and from their family members and from new connections. Um, maybe I would recommend try all the different things that maybe you haven't tried. Is there a hobby that you thought, oh, I could never do that? I wouldn't like, I don't want to run, or I don't like the thought of maybe painting. Maybe giving that a go and maybe exploring really sort of diverse environments where you might be pleasantly surprised, right? I think often as humans, we like to find comfort in the things that we do. So we tend to continue on the same path or in the same activities. And doing something that's unknown is very scary. Change is scary. But perhaps you might find your people through that.
That's great. Thank you, Clara. Another question, and it refers to the individual's earlier comment. How do you handle a situation where you feel you don't have a family to speak to? So for context, before this incident, they went out of their way, bought them gifts, and even made cash transfers. Now that the one of them has betrayed them and the rest have gaslighted them into being supported, I have a relatively good job and stable life, but just no family. And for
Mm,
once, I will admit that I'm not sure how to handle this situation because I feel left out when people reference family.
yeah. I think, it's really challenging to have to be in situations like that. And sometimes we have to accept that our family members might not be able to give us what we need from them, right? We don't get to choose our family. Um, and I think sometimes we can expect things from them, or even not even necessarily expect, but just for normal expectations to be gotten from them. And if they can't be able to give that to us, trying to find that in alternative ways from other individuals, if that's from new friends, if that's maybe speaking to someone, right? To a counselor, to a friend, to new connections that we make. It's a really difficult thing to accept sometimes that our family can't give us what we need. Um, but sometimes that's the sort of situation we might fall into.
That's great. Thank you again, Clara. And then the final question I believe I can see from the previous questions we were asked. What role can employers play in reducing workplace loneliness?
Yeah, great question. I think the workplace can definitely help in maybe setting up communities, if that's work run club or going into the office a certain day of the week. But even from the colleagues themselves, can you reach out to other people within the workplace and mention and invite them along to certain things? So I think setting up opportunities to create connections outside of work is a beautiful suggestion. And also, can you recommend anything that has helped you to a colleague within your working place?
That's great. Thank you, Clara. And I'd now like to take this opportunity as well to say a thank you to everyone who has asked questions and has been actively participating throughout the session. We really hope that you felt you got an hour of your time well spent. Before we conclude, can I just ask that you take a moment to fill in the quick 2-question polls that I've popped into the chat? Your feedback is important to us, and we appreciate any additional comments or suggestions you might have. For those interested, we will also automatically send out an invite for the next mental health webinar for those of you who have attended today. However, if you would rather opt out for future correspondence, please just let us know. Clara, I'll leave it up to you if you want to advertise your next webinar coming up and just a bit about it.
Yeah, I'll leave that to the email, as we're sort of still deciding the exact one. But yeah, thank you all to everyone for connecting today. I really appreciate your time, and just yeah, take care of yourselves. Make sure to your only homework is to do a little bit of self-care, and maybe reach out to one individual that either would appreciate your support and help them feel a little bit less